For parents, a large part of their heartbeat of hope for their child is dependent upon their health, which often symbolizes an opportunity to live a meaningful, healthy, and vibrant existence, which can help move the needle of progress and aspiration forward. We'll return to the notion of aspiration and innovation in just a moment, but first, I want to draw your attention to these following statistical findings to provide context for our discussion. According to the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, scoliosis affects 2 to 3% of the U.S. population, or approximately 6 to 9 million people across the United States. Scoliosis can develop in infancy or early childhood. However, the primary age for onset of scoliosis is between 10 and 15 years old, occurring equally among both genders. However, females are 8 times more likely to progress to a curve magnitude, which requires treatment. Each year, scoliosis patients make more than 600,000 visits to their physicians. An estimated 30,000 children are fitted with a brace, while an additional 38,000 patients undergo spinal fusion surgery. Dr. Mark Morningstar has devoted his career to forging a brighter pathway for children with scoliosis and their parents. His journey began with a Doctor of Chiropractic degree from Palmer College of Chiropractic and culminated in a PhD in Health Service Management from Concordia University. His expertise extends across 3 prestigious board certifications from the American Clinical Board of Nutrition, the American College of Spine Physicians, and the American Association of Integrative Medicine. You see, for Dr. Morningstar, scoliosis isn't merely a spinal issue. It impacts the entirety of your child's well-being and demands a holistic approach to determining solutions and coming up with a comprehensive treatment program, which resonates with the deepest part of a parent's heart. And Dr. Morningstar took some time out of his Friday to join me this week to discuss scoliosis rehabilitation, integrative medicine, chiropractic, neurology, and comprehensive spine care. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Take a moment to welcome you to the program, Doctor, and I'm super excited to learn all about your background in treating scoliosis. Great to see you, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Likewise, thank you very much.
Absolutely. No. Doctor, I know that you're someone who believes that scoliosis isn't merely a medical or spinal issue, my friend. It impacts the entirety of a child's well-being, my friend, and I know you believe it demands a holistic and a hard-sided approach, my friend. So I'm wondering if we can start our conversation by asking you about why you hold this philosophy and what you want people to know about treating scoliosis and how it impacts children, my friend.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, you asked a whole lot right there, but I'll unpack it accordingly. How's that? So, first and foremost, I think the hard part with scoliosis, or I suppose honestly the frustrating part about scoliosis for me, is that a lot of the information that I use to treat my patients is almost 50 years old now. So it's not even like it's new information, right? But the idea is, if I were to walk out into my local community and ask 100 people what scoliosis is, all of them would tell me that it's a curvature of the spine or something similar, or say something similar. But the problem is that curvature that we all recognize as scoliosis does not represent the entire condition. It only represents the most obvious musculoskeletal symptom of the condition. And there's a big difference because, like I mentioned, we have almost 50 years worth of scientific research published on scoliosis causes. And we know for a fact that kids who develop scoliosis during or around puberty are much more likely to have things like hormone problems, digestive issues, neurotransmitter imbalances, bone density deficiencies, other micronutrient deficiencies, central nervous system, sensory coordination problems. So there are a whole lot of other things upstream from the curvature that sort of allow that curvature to develop during a time of active growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doctor, you said that over the years, you've seen firsthand how optimizing spinal and neurological health can fuel overall wellness, my friend. So tell me what you want people to know about unlocking new levels of vitality and what people should know about some traditional stories that you've heard over the years and how they've impacted you personally. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, good question. So I think it sort of goes back to when I was in chiropractic school. One of the big personal mentors of mine, I guess you could say, was a doctor by the name of Rene Callier, and he's a medical doctor. And he published a book back, I believe, in the late 1980s called The Rejuvenation Strategy. And it was an entire book on how to do different postural exercises to improve your energy and your vitality. And everything was based on posture. And the idea behind that is a couple of things. First, what people don't recognize is that when we take in all of our calories from our diet each day, 90% of the energy that we derive from our calories is used for postural muscle control, or quite literally fighting gravity. And so that only leaves 10% for the rest of the body to use among, my cardiovascular system, my digestive system, my endocrine system, my respiratory system. So all of these other body systems are only competing for the same 10% of the energy. Meanwhile, 90% of my energy expenditure is going into posture. Well, the problem becomes if my posture is not optimal, instead of using 90% of my energy to sustain my posture, now maybe it's 92% or 94%. And so now all of my other body systems are only getting a fraction of what they were getting before. So now they begin to not run correctly. And so you have this whole sort of cascading downstream effect when your posture gets very bad. Now, the other side of that, in a one of the probably chief postural problems we suffer from in society today is what we call forward head posture. And forward head posture is, the result of, being on a phone all the time, or, playing video games, or being very sedentary, staring at a computer screen, where we're always kind of in kind of this slumped kind of head forward position. So we can either read a small iPhone, or we can, squint at the computer, program, see what we're typing, on and on. And the problem is when you have forward head posture, depending on how severe it gets, it can literally reduce your lung capacity by almost a third. So now you're not oxygenating as well. And when you're not oxygenating as well, of course, the first system that suffers is your central nervous system, because now your brain cannot go, and everybody knows this, but for a few moments without oxygen before it starts to have real damage done. And so the less you oxygenate, the more acidic you become, and therefore the more likely you are to develop different chronic diseases as a result of poor oxygenation. So really, at the crux of all of this, posture is really central to almost every facet of health. And if your posture is not what it should be, other body systems are essentially guaranteed to suffer in some capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. And doctor, just out of personal curiosity, because I was actually born with scoliosis, and as a result of my cerebral palsy, and I know that exercise is a big part of my life, because if I don't use my muscles, as you said, and stay in that sedentary position, I lose muscle functioning a lot faster than most people. So I'm curious to ask you about taking a proactive approach to preventative medicine and how it relates to scoliosis disability and living an active life. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Good question. So first and foremost, as far as the curvature itself is concerned, the natural history of scoliosis dictates that if you don't do anything to keep your curve stable and to keep your spine healthy throughout the lifespan, what happens is that curve can very slowly and insidiously increase across the lifespan. Now, typically speaking, that can be anywhere from 1/2 to 1.5 degrees per year on an ongoing basis. So, of course, if you're somebody who, once you are done growing and now you're, a full grown adult, for example, if I have a curvature of, say, 35 degrees, that curvature might become 15 degrees over the next 15 years. Well, at some point, and the problem becomes, is if a curvature reaches an 80 to 90 degree measurement, now there starts to become a real concern over having a heart or a lung compromise as a result of it. So that's sort of the long-term view. So from a preventive mindset, our goal becomes to at least keep somebody's curve stable so that they don't continue to have that ongoing worsening year by year. But the nice thing is that, as the old saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if I can teach people how to do basic things for their curvature to help keep it stable, they're less likely to have that worsening. And a lot of times the maintenance that we do to keep it stable only takes a few minutes per day. And the analogy I always use, it's almost like brushing your teeth for your spine. If I can teach you how to do something that only takes you maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes a day to do, you're more likely to be able to fit it into your day-to-day routine and commit it to habit, so that now you're just always doing it. Just like everybody overall is usually pretty good about brushing their teeth. Why? Because it's very easy to do. Obviously, our collective dental health would not be so good if all of a sudden the American Dental Association came out and said, all right, if you want to have truly the best dental health, you need to brush your teeth for 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week. Well, guess what? Probably nobody would do that. But they'll do 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes every day because it's easy and it's a routine. So if we can do that same kind of thing for your back, that's what, in my experience, has led a lot of my patients to have more stable spines over the long term, because it's easier to fit in as a routine.
Yeah, and Doctor, I'm curious to ask you about making, your spinal cord health a priority, and how we can really create what you call a resilient foundation for overall health, my friend. So why should people really value their spine health, my friend?
Good question. So very interestingly, a lot of people, and we see it, I think, more and more across society, because, again, as I mentioned earlier, in general, we are becoming more and more sedentary, right? Most people's jobs are desk jobs, or they're in cars, driving on the roads for prolonged periods of time. They're otherwise not, we're not collectively as active as we used to be because most of our jobs require us to be more sedentary in order to accomplish our jobs. Well, unfortunately, as a byproduct of that, what we're seeing are steady rises in the rates of dementia among our seniors because they're not as active as they used to be. Even our seniors are on their phones doing things and they're playing Sudoku or they're not active, they're not walking, they're not moving. And collectively for a long time the sort of conventional wisdom was that your spinal health was directly impacted by your cognitive health. And that people always thought, well, the reason why somebody is declining physically is because they're declining mentally or cognitively. But in reality, there was a very famous medical doctor named Dr. Sperry who actually won a Nobel Prize for this in the early 1980s, that demonstrated that, in fact, spinal motion in particular is almost like the wind turbine that provides energy for your brain. And so spinal movement is what creates the electrical energy that our brain runs on in essence. And so the more spinal motion we maintain throughout our given lives, and day to day, week to week, month to month, the better our cognitive and brain health is over the long term. And it's why we see a lot of times, especially in young boys, where ADD symptoms are so much more prevalent, is that if we have boys who move, they're much more likely to learn and to learn better than if they're just stuck in a school desk chair for 6-8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. One of the hard parts in particular about young males is that we're wired to be hands-on. We're wired to go out and do things. We're explorers just by nature. And we need to go out and feel how stuff is done. And we learn by doing. We learn by touch and feel, not by somebody just telling us and saying it to us. But the problem is, of course, you can't have a school educational system built on that because then you'd have, kids all over the place trying to do stuff. But in effect, that's how boys typically learn. And we need to foster that. And the way you foster that is by movement and activity and action and stimulating all of your special senses so that you learn things much, much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doctor, I know you're a big component or contributor to Back Genius, my friend, which is a trusted leader for scoliosis focused solutions and offerings. And I know that it's a holistic approach to the issue, and you really work with both the physicians, the patients, and everyone concerned about treating this issue from a holistic perspective. So tell me about all the good work happening at Back Genius, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So Back Genius is a company whose goal is to teach doctors worldwide on how to more comprehensively manage scoliosis and other chronic spinal conditions. I think one of the big things that everybody gets hung up on as far as scoliosis treatment goes, especially non-surgical scoliosis, is that people unfortunately get identified by the specific methods they use or the techniques that they use in their particular office or clinics. And I don't really want that to be the case. We have a lot of doctors in Back Genius who do a lot of different types of methods and techniques. And I suppose the best analogy I can think of off the top of my head is that if I'm trying to build a house, I need to use more tools than just a hammer. I need to have a whole bag or an arsenal of tools that I need to be able to build a house. Just like I need a whole bag of tools, of a variety of tools, if I want to most effectively manage scoliosis from a comprehensive sense. And what I mean by that is I need to make sure that if I'm working with a child or an adult who has scoliosis, I have to be as equally as interested in treating the curve itself as I am in trying to address and resolve all of the underlying things that person also has that initially contributed to the curve. Otherwise, if we ignore those, Nothing we do to physically treat the curve is going to have any chance of creating a lasting change in the curve or a lasting stability of the curve. And the problem is the big shortfall in most conventional scoliosis treatment strategies is that they almost entirely ignore the underlying drivers of the curve and just try to treat the curve. And so they're essentially ignoring 2/3 of the condition. And the problem that we see is that a lot of times then those treatments are eventually doomed to fail because you never got rid of the drivers of that curve in the first place.
Yeah, and Doctor, you also said that going back to the beginning of our conversation about research being outdated when you're treating scoliosis, and I know that Backlund works a lot with research-driven approaches, my friend, and research is at the heart of everything you do, from the formulation of the treatments to the products and services you offer. So talk to me about the importance of research and why it's so important to constantly look for new ways or new research that can contribute to this solution. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Sure. I would say, to me, I mean, research is one of the best tools that we have in a honest, basic effort to continue to find the truth about things. Now, of course, there are times when research gets usurped and it gets politicized, and I mean, we have all kinds of, people take advantage of it for unscrupulous reasons sometimes. But at its core, research is very necessary to find the truth of things. And one of the problems we've had historically with scoliosis in particular is that a lot of the research that's been published about it, especially in regards to the hormone problems associated with it and the bone density problems and the digestive issues, etc., those studies are typically academic studies in nature. They're performed at a university laboratory. They're done under very controlled circumstances. And as a result, a lot of day-to-day clinicians like myself don't necessarily always know how to take those principles and apply them to their daily clinical practices. So one of the biggest things that we do at Back Genius is when we have doctors join us and kind of take up this mantle with us, the biggest thing we try to impart to them is how to take all of this information from all over the world and apply it to their day-to-day practice so that they continue to get better than normal outcomes for all of their scoliosis patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doctor, I'm curious to ask you about what you want people to know about the root causes of scoliosis. And really, as people age, we all will develop some form of a disability moving forward. And I'm curious to ask you about the root causes of scoliosis and what you want people to know.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's pretty much at this point accepted that scoliosis is considered a multifactorial condition. And at its core, scoliosis has genetic predispositions that make it easier to develop. And those genetic predispositions are what allow a person to have low bone density, for example, or low progesterone, or altered estrogen sensitivity, and various other hormones. People with scoliosis are more likely to be vitamin D deficient, and all of these things are genetically predisposed. So if we can identify what those genetic predispositions are from person to person, it allows us to then tackle those in the sense of minimizing their impact on the curve, so that as we start to improve the curve, the results we're getting in the curve are more likely to last for a long time, if not forever, because we've addressed the underlying reasons as to why that curve is there in the first place. And I believe that eventually, by paying attention so specifically to that person's genomic risk profile for scoliosis, that I do believe that eventually we will be able to prevent it from happening altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doctor, I'm curious to ask you about, overall men's health in general, because as you know, most men don't like going to the doctor and they don't prioritize their overall physical health as a top priority. So I'm curious to ask you about your overall thoughts on men's health in general, and how men can really take a more proactive approach in valuing their health. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, sure. So I think first off, one of the unfortunate realities we have in our society today is that we have a lot of environmental drivers that are progressively lowering our collective testosterone levels. In fact, one of the big concerns upcoming is the current fertility rate issues that we are experiencing in the United States due to low sperm counts, poor sperm motility, low testosterone. All of these things are all kind of in the same, related to the same things. Well, in our environments today, we as men are constantly exposed to all kinds of chemicals that are what are collectively referred to as estrogen mimicking chemicals. And those chemicals are found on, the receipts at a gas station pump. They're found inside plastic water bottles. They're found inside plastic drink cups or Tupperware, or there are chemicals in the air, even Roundup that we spray on our crops. All interfere with our natural hormone production. And a lot of these estrogen mimicking chemicals start to, especially in males, yes, we should have some estrogen, but we should have our testosterone very, very heavily outweigh the amount of estrogen we're making. But the problem is when we're exposed to estrogen mimicking chemicals, it tilts the scale to where now males become estrogen dominant. And now we start to put on weight, and now our drive gets lower and our energy level suffers and all these kinds of things. But of course, as men, we've always sort of been conditioned over time, from a society perspective to, hey, we got to tough it out. We have to grin and bear it. We have to, I have a family to take care of. We have mouths to feed, all this kind of a concept. And men, that's what really drives men to want to be productive. But the problem is, as their testosterone levels continue to decline, they start to suffer in their ability to be physically active, to be romantically active with their spouse, to work a long shift, especially if they have a physical job. Let's say, for example, they're in a trade. Well, it becomes harder and harder to recover the older we get because our testosterone is suffering from all of the chemical exposure we have day to day. And the worse that gets, the harder it is for males, and the younger we're seeing males coming in with very low testosterone levels. Whereas that used to be something that only happened to men who were 50 years and up, but we're seeing it in our clinic now in men 25 and 30 years and up. And we've even had a few teenagers coming in, with low testosterone level, 16, 17, 18-year-old males coming in with low testosterone. And a lot of that is just because of these estrogen mimicking chemicals that we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Doctor, I'm also curious to get your perspective on closing, healthcare, inequalities for men, specifically, my friend, whether it's from a nutrition or access to healthcare perspective. How do you think we can close healthcare inequities into their society? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm sort of biased, and everybody's going to have their own opinion on this, obviously. But I think one of the biggest barriers that we have to have more equal access for people is insurance becomes a real problem. And the reason why insurance is a problem is because now you start to insert layers of people and layers of red tape and layers of processes that now come between the patient and that patient's provider. And so now, rather than me as the provider working with my patient, just one-on-one, having a conversation, doing what I think is right, I'm now subject and beholden to the insurance company and what they think is appropriate for you to do. And if I don't do that, well, you're now going to have to pay out of pocket for that because your insurance won't pay for it. And so a lot of people who have insurance, they end up getting care that would be what I would consider bare minimum care. They're not actively trying to do anything preventive. They're not actively trying to do anything to solve problems. They're just managing conditions. And I think until we can get to a place where we are actively trying to cure and reverse chronic health problems because the insurance model of medicine is such that it's a fee for service system, meaning I'm only getting paid to document certain problems about you. If you're my patient, for example, it doesn't matter what I'm doing treatment wise, as long as I document what we're talking about, I get paid. So there are a lot of factors feeding into, because it's one thing to talk about unequal access for people, but if your access is in some ways worse than not even getting medical attention, I mean, the inequity is even that much worse. Like, for example, there are doctors out there, doctors' clinics, especially if that doctor's clinic is owned by a medical practice, where they will artificially cap the number of patients that they take in a year who have, for example, a Medicaid insurance plan. Well, the problem is now I'm being labeled by the fact that I have Medicaid. And I see that all the time. I have a daughter who has cerebral palsy, and she has Medicaid as her secondary insurance. And just because it looks like a state Medicaid plan, she's already limited as to who she can see because she has this plan, even though she has regular insurance too. It's very strange. And as a result, she would quite literally be better off if we just went everywhere and said, we actually don't even have insurance at all. Because now doctors would be much freer to treat her how they want to treat her and have conversations with her that are not bound now by insurance obligations.
Doctor, you can't turn on the news without hearing about, the health care and, covering, those Americans who rely on the Obamacare subsidies and all the rest of it. So I'm not asking for your political opinion, but if you'd like to share it with me, you can. But I'm curious to ask you from a medical perspective, what's your current, view on what's happening in Washington and who really gets lost in the middle of this healthcare fight, in your opinion? Doctor, what are your thoughts there?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, people in Washington, let's just be honest. Nobody in Washington D.C. cares about everyday folks like us. They just don't. That's just the reality of it. And I think in terms of like the Obamacare subsidies and all that, again, we're going back to this idea that those subsidies, that money's not going back into the people's pockets. That money's going to the insurance companies. Mm-hmm. And yet still the insurance companies' premiums, it's not like they're going down. Even if they continue these subsidies, they're not going to drop their premiums. They're just not going to raise them as much. And so the problem again becomes people are paying a whole bunch of money into a system where the bulk of that money is now not even being used to take care of the patient. That money is being used to pay shareholders. It's used to pay suit and ties who work at the insurance company. And all these layers of red tape and bureaucracy at the insurance company level. What a lot of people don't realize is everybody's familiar with the idea of an HMO. But historically, the way an HMO plan was originally created, sort of like America's first HMO style plans, was when in local communities, people at a church or at a civic organization or at a factory where you had a number of people, let's say 50 people all working there, those 50 people would get together and they would basically, all of them would pay X amount of money per month to the local family doctor to take care of all of those 50 people. And they said, look, doctor, we want you to take care of us, and we're all each going to pay you X amount of months to take care of us. And that doctor then just took care of those people. Well, now all of those people, all of the money they're spending is going directly to that doctor. And because of that, the doctor doesn't have to charge as much and can spend more quality time with his patients or her patients. And more importantly, now they can also treat the patient in any manner that they deem fit without having to worry about somebody kind of looking over their shoulder saying, hey, look, we don't agree with your treatment plan. And I think the ultimate solution for healthcare is to allow healthcare in general to just get back to the concept of let a doctor and a patient have a mutual agreement between one another, and it's nobody else's business.
Well, it's a conversation that is certainly ongoing, and it's no one solution fits all. And I appreciate your perspective on the matter, my friend. And now I want to talk about, health, habit, and exercise, my friend. And why do you think those three things are interconnected, and what do you want people to know about it, my friend?
Sure. Well, I would say, it goes back to there are different things like you are what you eat, and you hear all these things. But movement really is life. I mean, most people don't recognize when we start to look at all the joints of our body, right? When you stop moving a joint for longer than 2 hours, which think about how long somebody might sit in a chair for, consecutively, or a semi-truck driver, for example, who might be driving their truck for, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours in a day. When you are immobile for only 2 hours, your weight-bearing joints, the cartilage in those joints start to deteriorate already, just from being 2 hours of immobile. And so movement really is life. Our bodies are designed to move, and we need to move and stay active. And so anything people can do, and it's not like you have to put in a ton of time. I think the best habit that people can develop is this idea that I need to do a little, a lot. Again, going back to the idea of brushing your teeth, for 2, 3, 4 minutes every day versus doing it 3 days a week for 20 minutes. If you can do a little, a lot, and apply that to every aspect of your life, you're more likely to be able to develop habits that are going to help keep you healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doctor, I'd be curious to ask you from a personal level, what inspires you to do the work that you do every day, and what does it mean to you to be Scully strong, my friend? What does that mean to you?
Well, so first and foremost, I think the biggest thing is when I was new in practice, the biggest thing I would always run into is that patients would come in to see me as a result of having problems that would be what I would consider to be self-inflicted. They're having problems related to lack of exercise, poor dietary choices, poor habits. Maybe they're smoking, that kind of thing. Things that are negative on their health. But the problem is they would come into me from a perspective of, doc, fix me. And yet the problem is all the stuff they're doing at home when they're not in the office seeing me. So I can fix them momentarily. I can provide them a Band-Aid, so to speak. But if they're not going to change the things they're doing at home that caused this problem in the first place, they're just always going to have to keep coming back. And to me, I didn't really like doing that kind of care because I never really felt like I was making a difference. And so along the way, in my local community, even though adult patients who came to see me would never follow the exercise recommendations that I gave them to do at home, if their children had problems, come hell or high water, they were going to make sure their child did what I told them to do, by and large. And the epitome of this was scoliosis. So in my local community, we don't have an orthopedic surgeon who specializes in scoliosis. So people have to typically drive, an hour away or so. So naturally, a lot of them would come bring their children in to see me because I was local. And they said, look, we don't know who else to take our child to. We just found out from our pediatrician she has scoliosis. Well, the difference immediately was that now when I started working with that child, first and foremost, that child didn't have a problem that was a consequence of their own poor choices. It's not like they were eating bad and that caused scoliosis. It's not, this is a condition essentially that they were in many ways born with as far as genetic predisposition goes. So they didn't do this to themselves. And so right away, I felt bad for them by virtue of the fact that they were sort of a victim of their circumstance. And secondly, then, when I gave them a plan to do not only for the office, but also to continue to do at home, lo and behold, they started getting better. And pretty soon we started getting a good reputation, even from the orthopedic surgeons an hour away, that what we were doing was helping. And the reason it was helping is because the parents were making the children do it. But even though the parents themselves might not have done anything that I told them to do, they were for sure going to make their children do it. And lo and behold, it made the results much more consistent, which made me much happier with what I was doing career-wise.
It all comes full circle and it's all interconnected, isn't it?
That's right. I know, it's so weird.
Absolutely, my friend. And Doctor, my final question for you this afternoon has to do with your own personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want that to be defined.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, obviously, I got into what I do to help. You know, it's like you want to leave the world better than how you came into it. And as long as I have generations of kids who know that because of the stuff I was able to teach them, they were able to have a better life. That's all I want. It's really no simpler than that. And if I can teach other doctors how to do the same thing I'm doing, now not only am I helping the patients that I'm treating myself, but I'm indirectly helping thousands of other patients who are being treated by doctors that I've trained on how to do this through Back Genius.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, if people want to get connected with you personally, what's the best way they can do that?
Sure, you can find our website is scoliosispractice.com. You can also email me directly at mmorningstar@backgenius.com, or you can just visit backgenius.com. Any of those three will work.
Fabulous. Well, Doctor, I really want to thank you for your work in scoliosis medicine and really helping people understand the importance of their spine health and for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Thank you for having me on. I sincerely appreciate it, Kevin.